This podcast is brought to you thanks to the generous support of Whistler Blackcomb, leaders in delivering adventure.
I was caught in this avalanche. I shattered my tib fib. And then my physio right off the bat was like, you're never going to be who you were. and as somebody who's like defines himself by what he does, I was like, what? I need to be able to hike up mountain, run around, just do these things that bring me so much rewards. And I was very concerned that it was over.
This is Delivering Adventure. Welcome to the podcast that explores what it really takes to share adventure like a pro, with your friends, your family, and as a profession. My name is Chris Capio, and I'm coming to you from Whistler, British Columbia.
And I'm Jordy Shepard, recording from Canmore, Alberta. After a lifetime of working extensively in different parts of the adventure guiding industry, Chris and I have teamed up to launch this podcast. In each episode, you will hear top adventure guides, managers, marketers, and athletes share their best stories, advice, and trade secrets. The goal of this podcast is to share how you can take yourself and others farther from the mountains to the office and beyond.
In this episode, we pick up where we left off in our last episode with Greg Hill. In the last episode, Greg shared some of his experiences involving his record-setting backcountry ski touring endeavors and how he kept himself motivated. In this episode, we continue our discussion on how we can make adventure more sustainable. Just to bring everyone up to speed, Greg is an ACMG ski guide, athlete, and filmmaker. Some of his achievements include climbing 2 million vertical feet in a single year on skis, climbing over 50,000 vertical feet in a 24-hour period on skis, and summiting 9 of the 10 highest peaks in the Selkirk Mountains in British Columbia. In 2006, National Geographic named him as one of the top 14 adventurers on the planet based on his achievement of climbing 1 million vertical feet that year. Jordy, in practical terms, can you put some of Greg's accomplishments into context for our listeners?
Yeah, Chris, basically, Greg honed himself into a ski touring machine and a well-oiled machine at that. To climb 2 million vertical feet in a year, that would mean skinning up and then skiing down the equivalent of Whistler Mountain. For those of you who know that, but picture a fairly, large, high relief mountain, plus some every day for a year. So just think about that, for all of us, we put our ski boots on a lot in the winter, and some of us do in the summer, but imagine doing it every day for a year and doing the equivalent of going up and down a mountain. That takes more than just physical conditioning. It's this huge emotional, mental commitment by Greg to get through that. And it really, if you take a look at the back end of it, it also took huge support from his family.
Well, let's see what else Greg has to say about physical and environmental sustainability. What I'd like to shift to is going from your motivation to hit those targets to how you maintain yourself physically. I make it through the end of a winter of skiing, and I usually do about 125, 30 days. By the end, I'm a little bit worn out motivationally, but my body is sore. And I don't know many instructors and skiers who don't start to wear down and feel the aches and pains and things like that. Like, how do you take care of yourself, and how did you keep yourself in a position where you could keep going?
Yeah, I think, most of these, I'm 46 now. Most of my endurance challenges were up to about bigger ones were up to like 36. So I had a bit of a rubbery body, I think. It was a lot easier in your mid 30s, your early 30s to recover from things. Now I definitely pay attention to my body quite a bit more because I kind of have to. If I don't stretch, I was at my masseuse the other day and she couldn't believe it because I've kind of had a down period. I haven't been doing my stretches and my exercises. But I am pretty diligent with at least 6 months of every year, probably around 6 months of doing, I've got weights and stuff over here and chin-up bars and kind of doing the cross training. It's never the full year. I always have downtime. And I think that's important. I definitely definitely listen to my body a lot, and I let it kind of dictate. Some days you're just going to sit on the couch and not do a lot, but during the, yeah, I mean, I guess that's the key. Like in the winter, I pay attention, and I try not to just, especially these days, go 7 days a week endlessly. Um, but there's going to be some stretching, there's going to be some rolling, there's going to be some things to just keep the body a little bit more flexible. Um, how do you do it?
Probably very similar to what you're doing. What you're alluding to is trying to mix up the activity, stretching. I'm not nearly as good at stretching as I need to be. My physio described me as being the guy who goes to yoga for stiff guys and ends up being the stiffest guy.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
pretty, you're pretty tight. But that being said, me personally, I try to stay as active as I can. But I also notice that I've been pretty cautious throughout my whole career. If you compare me to the
yeah.
other people that do what I do, um, I don't tend to take the risks. I tend to go slower. I'm a really slow skier compared to what most people that do what I do. But in addition to being lucky, that's helped me to avoid the big accidents and injuries and things like that I think can really threaten the careers of a lot of people that do the kind of stuff that we do. And it's hard, right? Because there's always a risk too. There's a risk that if I'm not pushing myself harder, then I'm not developing as much as I could. But the flip side is we only have one body, and you've got to maintain it for as long as you can. Because once it wears down, and you blow out your knee and you get arthritis, or those sorts of things, then those are the things that stay with you.
I think, especially now that I'm older, I mean, core strength seems really key. I've watched a few people injure themselves this last winter because I could tell their core wasn't strong enough. And just those plank exercises that my physio gives me and stuff, I mean, I really think it's key. And I think, yeah, I think we should stay active, but I believe there should definitely be some down periods every year. To be active 12 months of the year, I think would definitely wear on it. I like the downtime, but I look to my mom and stepdad who are 77 and 73, and they've been active. They're on their mountain bike ride right now. And I think definitely staying active every day, even if it's just a mellow activity, is going to help your body to stay fluid, your joints stay fluid, and have your body ready for impacts. Just, I mean, more like walking impacts or whatever.
I think there's a lot to, you're mentioning core strength. There's so much I wish I had known 30 years ago about my body and what I need to do to keep the different parts in shape and fit and strong. So the different stretches, the core strength, every professional I've spoken to, whether it's a masseuse or a physio or a chiropractor, has given me a different understanding of how my body works and how to keep it maintained. It's like a mechanic talking to you about how your car works and how to keep it, functioning in a good level. And I think if we don't have that understanding, then we can be lucky, and some people are definitely lucky to have bodies that are in good condition that don't need as much maintenance. But eventually it does start to break down.
Yeah, I think, I mean, especially also talking about my shoulder dislocating, like possibly back then, I mean, there just wasn't as much available. I'm sure I knew that I needed to cross train a bit, but there wasn't anything specific or what have you. I feel like there's definitely a better world now where possibly the 21-year-old Greg wouldn't have dislocated his shoulder because he would have been doing push-ups and a couple other things on the side that would have countered all the steep climbing he was doing. You know, although I did know that you were supposed to warm up, and I thought the bottom of the climb was enough of a warm up, which was really dumb. But you do. If you look at pro climbers now, you see, oh, they all start off nice and easy and warm their way up, and they have fingerboards that they bring to the cliff, and all. It's like there's definitely a lot more available to keep us on with good bodies than there used to be.
6 years ago, I had some hip issues that I actually thought was going to end my career. Bothered me all summer. I ended up going to physio multiple times a week. And I really did think that was the end of it. It was kind of mid-40s, and then luckily I saw the chiropractor and put me in shape. And while that situation has still kind of stuck with me, it's more manageable now. Have you ever been in a situation where you thought your career might not be physically sustainable?
Well, for a while I was naive and didn't realize how lucky I was. But no, so I mentioned breaking my leg in the avalanche, and what is that? 8 years ago now, 2014. So yeah, I was caught in this avalanche. I shattered my tib fib, and then it was quite the procedure. I got Dr. Hurd in Banff to do it, and when he put it back together, the surgery typically takes about a half an hour for him, and it took about 2 hours because he was like putting all these pieces of the puzzle back together to put my leg so it was somewhat straight. And then my physio right off the bat was like, you're never going to be who you were. and as somebody who's like defines himself by what he does, I was like, what? I need to be able to whatever, hike up mountains and run around and just do these things that bring me so much rewards. And it was a long process of healing, and I definitely was very concerned that it was over. I wasn't sure what I was going to fall back on, but it looked like, maybe I wouldn't even walk that well, or that first winter of ski touring was so hard on my body. I can remember the first time I went out ski touring 2,000 feet, which used to be nothing for me, like a half hour of up. But on the ski down, my legs wasn't even strong enough to ski the whole way down. I had to sit on the cat track, and I remember I was like yelling at my leg to like activate, but it couldn't because I didn't have the strength or whatever. And I was pretty sure it was over. But one thing I have is I've got a lot of naive optimism, so I just kept focusing on, the physio and trying to prove that physio wrong because whatever she'd said. And I right off the bat I got back into more running because I wanted impact. I wanted the leg to just feel and just heal as best it can. And it definitely a super long process. And I mean, for sure, my physio was slightly right. I'll never get back to what I was, but I was still able to get to my present 100%, which is still pretty damn good. And it still provides me with enough strength and energy to go and adventure and find what I need to be happy. And I'm pretty fortunate, but it definitely required lots of focus. And I was always doing exercises to try to bring it back. And I mean, I did some leg strengths in the fall, and my left leg was at 140 pounds and my right leg was at 200 pounds. So there's still a huge discrepancy there. But luckily, I've got the stamina and drive to kind of overcome that and keep enjoying what I get to do. But for sure, 2014, I was like, oh, I think I'm over. And I had no idea what I was going to do. So then that's sort of when a big pivot in my life happened, which I know we're going to get to later, but maybe we'll get to right now, is that lying on that couch healing for whatever it was, the 3 months that I couldn't even weight bear, I really started looking at my life. I'm like, okay, what legacy have I left behind? And what, if I died in that avalanche, what would my kids think? What memories would they have? And I objectively tried to really look at my life. And I think it's a good thing to do. But I was looking, I was like, it's really cool. I showed people that, the potential, we've all got more potential than we think, and, how to push ourselves. And I loved that. But I started looking and I was like, well, I don't really have any, like, there wasn't a lot of give back. It was a lot of selfish, and selfish is great. Like, life is selfish, but I think in our lives we can have some aspects that are like about giving back. And I'm taking people out in the mountains, but there was no real like giving back. And so while I was healing, I was like, okay, let's look into how I can maybe use this little soapbox I've got and try to become a better adventurer. Because my brother's been an environmentalist for years, and for sure the writing has been on the wall forever. But I started really looking at myself, and I was like, I'm somebody who's out there, loves nature, gets so much reward and everything from nature. I'm sure you guys agree. But I wasn't being a steward for it. I was like jumping in my F-350, my big diesel truck, driving whatever 50 kilometers, and starting my snowmobile up, which would spew fumes everywhere. And then I'd rip out up some logging road, spewing fumes everywhere and gas. And then I'd go and I'd enjoy nature, and I'd just be in my sublime place where everything was perfect and I was happy. And I started really looking. I was like, well, this doesn't make any sense at all. Like you're killing what you love. And then so that's when I was on the couch. I was like, okay, well, let's see if I can do something better. Maybe like show my kids and teach them and their friends, what have you, that there maybe there's a way that we can be sustainable adventurers and give back to Mother Nature and kind of help protect it, because we're the stewards, we're the ones that are out there. So let's see what we can do. So yeah, that's sort of the journey I've been on for a while now. I was trying to figure out how to adventure differently. I mean, I basically since 2017, every adventure I've been on has been electric powered in my little car without any fossil fuels. Um, I've broken down a couple times, maybe 3 times in the last 5 years for adventures. I do use gas occasionally, but for adventures strictly, has only been a few times, and that's been really neat, because I've just kind of, especially in 2017, we all thought electric cars were Teslas and they're all for commuting and nothing else. And I mean, now there's lots of electric cars out there. But it was neat just trying to see if you could live an adventurous life and have less impact. And getting rid of my F-350, my snowmobile, I stopped heli ski guiding, stopped using helicopters except for emergencies. And yeah, it was kind of a whole process that was quite neat. And I'm still on it. It's a journey, like I call it. I say the EV, it was a vehicle for an idea, and it was. It just kind of, it helped me change things in my life, helped me try to figure out ways to have less of an impact at home, and it's kind of an ongoing process.
Do you have an e-bike?
I have an e-bike. Yeah, I do.
I find it's got a lot of it's become my sport utility vehicle. I've got an e-fat bike I use in Canmore here, and
Yeah,
in 2 years I've got 5,000 kilometers on it, and I don't drive my truck or my motorcycle around town very much anymore at all, unless I'm getting something from something too big to carry. But it's amazing what you can
yeah,
carry with a few racks and some
yeah,
innovation on a big e-bike, and yeah, it's been a game changer.
yeah. And like, just think of that. Like, there you were your individual impacts right there, 5,000 kilometers that you could have used gas or not, and you didn't. And it's neat to see that just little choices like that actually overall have big impacts. But yeah, I live about 3 kilometers from the main downtown Revelstoke, and 3 kilometers isn't far on a normal bike. It's pretty easy. But regardless of how energetic I am on some things, I'm also quite lazy at other things, and it's quite easy to drive into town. Even if I'm driving my e-car, it's better to be on my e-bike, and that sort of thing. But yeah, I love it. Or just e-biking to the trailheads is pretty fun too, and just go off running and jump back on your bike. And I mean, I'm sure your town's the same. It's as quick into town biking as it is driving.
It's faster. Yeah.
Yeah, because you don't have to stop at stop signs,
Oh, I always stop at stop signs.
right?
In terms of the electric forms of transportation, there are people that are arguing that it's not all that green just because of, the carbon footprint that comes with building these things and batteries and where the power comes from. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, you can read articles that argue both sides pretty easily. Um, yeah, there's a lot of them. I think, yeah, regardless, we're going to have impacts. To me, it's investing my idea, or the electric idea, is that we need to start looking into something different. The status quo is obviously not doing that well. Every car is getting bigger. They have less mileage per liter than they used to. We're actually going the wrong way with those cars. So yeah, electric cars do have a big impact. When they're built, whatever it is, 8 tons. But then once you have it, the second you're driving, especially in BC, we're 98% BC hydro. So theoretically, although yes, dams aren't great, you know, nothing's perfect. Perfect is walking back and forth to places. But once you look into the vehicles, I mean, there's for sure I've read lots of articles that prove that once you have your EV, you just keep using it, and the impacts are less than a gas car. You're not putting out fossil. You're not using fossil fuels every day. Obviously, there's a lot invested in it. The recycling, yes, all of a sudden you go down the lithium thing, and all of a sudden there's all the issues with the lithium mining. It's endless, but you also there's going to be a huge demand for all those batteries and the recycling. They're already figuring out how to recycle, I think 95 or 97% of the batteries. All that stuff. Once the value's there and there's enough batteries, the recycling is going to happen. So there's a lot of evolution that can happen in the electric car market, whereas fossil gas cars, it's been well over 100 years and they aren't really changing. So to me, it's like I'm investing in an idea that's only going to get better versus staying with a status quo that's not getting any better.
And a lot of it is it's thinking about consumption, right? And just it's causing us to think about our consumption. And it's interesting because when you feel like you can just drive anywhere and always find a gas station, and you can get quite long ranges in a gas powered vehicle, or even carry an extra can of gas with you, kind of thing, to extend it, you don't think about it as much. And I find moving to an electric bicycle, for example, like I am constantly watching that odometer. Like how far have I gone on this charge? How much further can I go on this charge? How can I conserve and actually pedal, as or when I'm going downhill, turn off the electric side, all that kind of stuff, right? And it just makes you think about it, which I think is a big thing for us in society to move towards, and not just take it for granted that you can always just throw more gas in your vehicle and carry on.
Yeah, no, I think that's absolutely on point. It does. It's like, yeah, you just all of a sudden recognize your impacts. And like I said, it's a vehicle for an idea, and that I've changed considerably. I'm about to put solar panels on my roof just to have them, because that's kind of the next step in being more responsible for my personal impacts. Yeah, it changed the way I drive. I used to be somebody that would just hammer from A to B, from Revelstoke to Vancouver was always less than 6 hours, 5.5, 5:15 is my dad's record. But since I've had an EV, I'm the most relaxed driver out there, because I understand that I'm going to get better range if I drive 95 kilometers an hour. And I don't get into the whole road rage and stress because everybody's passing me. I'm just tootling along, enjoying myself, listening to music or podcasts or my own thoughts. And it's actually like absolutely changed the way I drive, which is great.
And it can cause you just to enjoy the journey more when you're actually traveling, instead of just it's always been, well, when I get to wherever I get off the airplane or that sort of thing, right? Now I feel quite guilty when I'm on an airplane going somewhere, which fortunately, I guess with the pandemic, not too many people have actually been traveling by air, or it's definitely been reduced. But when I have just recently I went to Quebec for some work to teach an avalanche search and rescue course, and a couple months ago, and I was on an airplane, and I was thinking about all kinds of stuff, pandemic and masking up and all that kind of stuff. But I was also thinking, wow, this is the first time I've been on an airplane in a year and a half, and that wasn't normal operations for me. I was flying quite a bit for work and for pleasure, and my wife is a sustainability expert, right? That's the field she's in, and it's just making us more conscious of what we're doing, and then realizing we can make those choices that don't really negatively affect us at all. We still live our lives and have our adventures, and we can have our cake and eat it too. Just have it be more sustainable into the future.
Yeah, and I think with Protect Our Winters, we call it's progress over perfection, and so many of us are stuck on this idea that we're not perfect, so screw it. I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing, and I think just realizing that, yeah, we're not aiming for perfection. We're not going to get down to 2 tons a year in Canada. But if all of us are just being conscious of it, and if it's in our conversation and our thoughts, we're going to figure out different options. I mean, you go to a taco place, if you order the chicken taco versus the beef tacos, you're having much less impact. And even just having that idea, knowing that, oh, I'll just have this, has less of an impact. I think I think that's what's really happening now, is that the mindset's changing. Everybody's starting to understand that, yeah, sure, we can all actually do little things here. You're never going to be perfect, but I can at least choose this battle or that battle and accept that I'm not great on this side. You know?
Yep, it's always give and take. So what do you think about longer distance travel for yourself, and how that's changed or changing for you, and affecting you or not affecting you?
Yeah, I mean, right off the bat, when I just started just driving electrically, I was telling my sponsors and everything, I was like, no, listen, I'm not going anywhere. Let's just accept that this is what I'm doing. I think there's a lot of value in this. And, now it's definitely evolved a bit where I've taken a few flights if I can figure out if the destination's worth it. I'm trying not to be frivolous. It's almost like, okay, let's just be really conscious. I have a family reunion in Ontario and I'm going to go there. Like I don't want to miss out. I haven't seen my family for quite a few years, and I'm going to go to it. I'm going to accept that there's impacts, but I do. Their offsets are better than nothing, so I'll offset my flights, and then when I'm there, I'll make sure that I multitask it, and then I do some business in Toronto and visit some other friends in Montreal, so I make it a valuable trip and kind of max it out that way.
And that's a really good point, is choosing to offset as well. And again, it shows that you're being thoughtful about what you're doing. You're actively making a choice to have an emissions footprint. But I was doing that heli skiing as a guide. It's like, okay, well, I'm not heli skiing as much for actually essentially the same reasons as you. Now I feel like that's a carbon footprint that I can probably do without. But when I was heli skiing and I was managing a heli ski company, I put in an offset program that was optional for guests, but I partook in that myself as a guide, and said, okay, well, this year I'm going to have this. This is my portion of my emissions for being in that helicopter. So, and it's actually not that big a deal financially, even, right? It's just making the choice to do it.
Yeah, and it is. It's good. At least you're like, I recognize my impact, and I know it's there, but I'm gonna try to make it so that somebody in the future doesn't have to, and I'm gonna invest in this project or whatever. And yeah, it's offsets aren't perfect, but they're definitely a way to one, yeah, be responsible and ideally push other projects that are going to help other people save carbon at some point. Or yeah,
Well, we could talk about this probably all day. Maybe we'll do another sustainability episode that we'll have you on for. Thanks for your thoughts on that.
yeah. Well, I'll quickly talk. So something I'm planning. I did one course last year, but I want to have people come to Revelstoke and organize their whole trips to make them as sustainable as possible. Show them how to offset their flights, get them to do carbon calculation at home, because there's a lot of things you can do on your home energy bills that people don't know about. Like this writer that came on one of my trips, I looked at her energy bill, and for an extra $1.50 a month, all of her electricity all of a sudden came from a wind farm. And it's just there's these things we don't know about. So I want to kind of run these like courses where people come and they rent an electric car to Kelowna, show them that so they can kind of test the waters, and then eat as sustainable as possible and that sort of thing, and just kind of share some of my knowledge and try to make their footprints less, and then maybe that they'll take it home and they'll teach somebody else. I mean, Cassidy, she was blown away by just that quick click of the button and the fact that all our energy is much better now.
Greg, I run into so many people that will arrive in Whistler, and I'll ask them where you hear from, and they'll say, well, just North Vancouver. And I find it so funny. It's like, no, you're not from just North Vancouver. You're from North Vancouver. It's one of the world's best cities. Like that's amazing. But I think people have this perception that if you're not from somewhere else or somewhere further away, it's not exotic. And the further away it is, the more exotic it is. And so how do you think we can find more value and appreciate trips and adventures closer to home?
Yeah, I guess for me, what I started realizing is I've traveled all around the world. I've skied lots and lots of places. And so, say Norway, we skied a bunch of great lines there, some first descents, what have you. And they're amazing, but then I never see them again. Whereas I think there's so much value in your backyard because you get to see those peaks again. And then when you see them, it'll trigger the memory and you'll revisit that memory. So they kind of resonate for longer. Like I haven't done it yet, but the lions, in Vancouver, I have yet to climb them, but I can't wait to climb them because once I finally do, every time I fly in, I'll look up there or drive in, what have you. I'll look up there and I'll be like, oh yeah, that cool day where we hiked up that and we had lunch there or what have you. And I think to me, backyard adventures resonate for a lot longer. Say the Tantalus Range. Every time I drive up to Whistler now, I look over there and I'm brought back to the only day I've ever had there, but it keeps living. Whereas those far off adventures, sure, they're incredible at the time, but they kind of slowly fizzle in your memory. So to me, that's the biggest thing is that the more you get to know your backyard, the more all those memories resurface and live a lot longer.
Thanks so much for coming, Greg. It's been awesome to hear your thoughts on sustainable adventure today. It's been really, really enlightening. If you're looking to learn more about Greg, please visit his website, greghill.ca, not .com. That's greghill.ca. So, Chris, what were some of your key takeaways from what Greg had to say in this episode on how we can deliver more sustainable adventures?
There were a lot of great points there, Jordy. Two that I will share with our audience that came to mind for me is to start with that idea of doing what you can. And so one of the things that Greg highlighted was the small things that he has done, small changes that he has made to help to reduce his impact. Things like taking a bike instead of driving, driving slower instead of going faster, choosing destinations that are closer instead of going further away. And on that last point, I really like the idea that you don't have to travel further away to get great adventures. He highlighted the idea that adventures can happen closer to home, and often those adventures, we will remember them more often because we get to see where they happened on a regular basis. He, used the example of, his trip to Norway where he went and did some amazing things, but he may never make it back to Norway again. And so that experience isn't going to get relived in his memory as he goes forward. It's also worth noting that Greg likes to call himself Electric Greg because of his use of electric vehicles to access adventures closer to home. Jordy, what stood out to you?
Well, one of the big ones, and I think we all struggle with this, is looking after yourself physically, looking after your body. To really have a long life of adventuring, you need to make sure that you look after yourself, your body. And this means keeping on top of strength training, stretching, taking breaks when needed, good nutrition and hydration, getting sleep, and addressing problems when they come up, or hopefully even before they come up. And even going to get physio, before overuse issues blow up. And I'm probably an example of not doing a number of those things, just so you know. Another thing that stood out for me was that there's really no substitute for formal education. So, in the first episode, he talked about this the whole way along. And so let's focus a bit on that, the idea of first aid training, skills training, professional development, and keeping up your personal skills, professional skills. And for example, I'm going to Revelstoke next week to run an avalanche search and rescue professional development session for the Canadian Avalanche Association. And there's going to be 18 participants there who are all very high-end professionals. And it's going to be great to bounce ideas off of them and just to, hone up our skills at the start of the upcoming season here for avalanche search and rescue. Really, the better we are, the more equipped we are to deal with things that go wrong. And things don't go wrong, kind of in a planned way. So by having a good, well-rounded set of tools and keeping those tools really nice and honed and sharp, then we can just pull them right out of the toolkit and use them as we need to. And hopefully through good planning, preparation, we don't have to, use these skills all the time. And the reality is, I found operationally, if you use something a lot regularly, you probably have to train a bit less for that. And it's the stuff that you don't use very often that you have to actually spend more time training on and practicing on. So if you don't do first aid a whole lot in your regular things that you do, then probably spend a little bit more time being up on that and making sure you know where your stuff is. And along with this idea of educating ourselves and keeping up on things, it's the reality is the more we know, the easier we can make things on ourselves and others. And this can really help us to be more efficient as professionals. We can save time, energy, and then one of the keys to being a pro is being efficient. And that's what helps the true pros live longer adventure lives.
These are all excellent points, Jordy, and thanks again to Greg for coming on the show. Now let's turn it over to you, the listener. What were your takeaways? What stood out to you? You can share your thoughts, stories, or insights with us via our social media feeds or by emailing us. You can find all of our contact information at deliveringadventure.com. We have also posted our contact info in the show notes, as well as a link to Greg's website. Also, please don't forget to follow or subscribe to this podcast through your favorite streaming service, and if you can, please share this with your like-minded friends. This is how you can help to make this podcast sustainable. Before we go, we have one last funny story to share about Greg. Thanks for listening.
I've got a funny story about you, Greg. So I was in Frisbee Creek, northwest of Revelstoke, a drainage there in the springtime I was actually taking a ski guide exam. And I believe you might have to correct some of the details here, Greg, but I believe we flew in, you were doing this Monashees Traverse that you planned out. That had nothing to do with the guide course, except that we were flying in there. So you'd orchestrated that we would fly in a food cache for you to where we were base camping there for our week of guide exam. And so we the guides candidate group, we dug it in and flagged it out for you there where we said we were going to leave it for you to find in the snow. And I thought not too much of it, but we did all kind of add into it a little bit there. So, some folks, left a beer or some tobacco or, and so we'd done all this preparation for being in the area, including having lots of maps. And so I had this kind of cartoonish artist rendition of the CMH heli-ski tenure map there that showed the CMH runs. And I just jokingly threw that in the box there because I didn't need it anymore. I was done my guide exam, and I just used it for reference for where the heli-ski runs were, but not for actual navigation. And then I see Greg in Revelstoke, where I was living at the time too. This is a few months later. He's done this Monashees Traverse, which sounds like it went quite well, and you made your way back to Revelstoke, right to Revelstoke on the Traverse. But Greg he thanked me for leaving that map there because they didn't have a map for that last leg of the journey of the Traverse because they're in like home terrain, right? It's like, oh yeah, we just cruised through these last couple drainages, but he said it was kind of nice to have like something with it sketched out which way the drainages went. So that worked out quite well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, I do definitely remember your map. It helped us figure out this nice sneak through, but we really did like the tobacco at the time. That really helped us get through our last 6 days. That was 2002 also, I think, that you're talking. It's quite a long time ago.
Yeah, it's going 20 years back. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, we were quite thankful for everything extra that you guys had left.